and welcome to the No Grow Go podcast. I'm Matt Jordan. I'm the senior pastor here at First Methodist Church. And again, I know Founders Day was just a couple weeks ago, but I hope that you are still on cloud nine for all that the Lord is doing in the life of our church. And we are just so excited for what the future has for us as a congregation. I do want to ask that you just continue to pray for those in our congregation who are sick. If you've got a bulletin, look at the prayer concerns there on the bottom and just see how you can use that as a guide for your prayer time. If you're spending time in your prayer closet, or maybe the podcast is a part of your devotional time, whatever it may be, I just encourage you to look through those names and pray for them one by one, and maybe send them a text if you have their number, and just reach out and say, hey, you're on our prayer list at church. I just want you to know I love you and that I'm thinking about you. Be a great way for you just to keep the congregation at the front of your mind. Today, we have a special guest, a dear friend of mine, a dear friend in the community, and an educator and someone whose children are involved in our church in many, many ways, and who is also our men's ministry chair, which they have a lot on the docket for this upcoming year. He's going to share some about that as well. But today we have Dr. Perry Dillard, who is with us. He's going to share his testimony and share a little bit about the men's ministry and about the church and all that Christ means to him. And so we are excited. So Perry, you want to tell us a little more about yourself?
Okay. Well, so we've lived here in Enterprise about 12 years. Like Matt said, I've been in education for 25 years. My wife is Stephanie Dillard, who's the child nutrition director for Enterprise City Schools, and we have two children, Elizabeth, who is going to be 10 in November, and Ellie's going to be 7 in November. And they love really the children's ministry and everything that we get to do here.
Awesome. Well, and Perry, I know this may be a sore spot, but we did beat Andalusia 31-10 the other night.
And we were planning to go to the game. I went last year to the Andalusia Enterprise game in Andalusia, and I coached in Andalusia, played football there, and so we were going to go there. We had several friends from Andalusia coming over, and it was raining, and I told Stephanie, we don't have to go to games in the rain, so we came home and we watched it on the back porch on TV. So, yeah, it was not a good night for the Bulldogs, but
it was a great night for the Wildcats.
Yes, it was.
And when I was in college, we always joked with one another and said that everything points to the gospel, and so it was a joke we'd always have when one of our teams didn't win. We'd say, everything points to the gospel. All need a little hope. Yes, and when you win, there's victory in Jesus too. So,
yeah.
But Perry, one of the things we've been doing on our podcast here lately is just sharing your story. How Jesus has changed your life, and so I'm thankful that you agreed to come and share your story today. So why don't you start us off and tell us how it happened from the beginning, man?
Yeah. So a lot of people say that they were into drugs in high school and things. Actually, I was drugged to church my whole life. So I grew up in Andalusia, and we attended a rural congregation there, and everybody was family. Like I had several uncles and aunts that really weren't my uncles and aunts, but that's how you addressed them. And I grew up before cell phones, Matt. So like one of the big things was to go into church, and that's where you develop community. And so I had my core group of friends. We all kind of went to church together, played football together. And I was real fortunate in a lot of ways. I didn't have peer pressure like a lot of normal teens did, because we were all kind of tight. And one of our friends, his dad was an alcoholic, and he wouldn't let anybody drink around him. And so that was never a temptation. But one of the things that really kind of made a huge impact on my life and really changed it was my freshman year. We got a new football coach, and Coach Prater came in, and he happened to go to our church, and he was asked to teach the teen class, and so he did. And so throughout high school, my head football coach was my Sunday school teacher.
Wow.
And so I got to see his witness not only on the football field, but and so I never experienced coaches using profanity or things like that, because he was such a good Christian man. And he also, when he was at Alabama Christian as a teacher and coach, he taught the book of Genesis. And so we learned Genesis like the back of my hand. And every time somebody new came to class, he had a chart of all the lineages of the people in Genesis. And so we had to recite the chart. And so we did that. And then when I was a freshman in college, he made a transition to Montgomery to work at Alabama Christian Academy. And I was going to Faulkner, which is, they were one school at one time. And so I was able to get involved in coaching at like the junior high level at Alabama Christian. So I did that through college. And then when I graduated high school, I started out at Alabama Christian. So I had this, I didn't have a road to Damascus experience or a prodigal son experience I was always kind of in church. I was raised in church. I was very fortunate to have two parents that were always there, that were great examples. And then when in college, I was at a Christian university and in a Christian environment and had lots of experiences. Faulkner was a real impact on my life because it was a very small school. And so it forced me into some leadership roles that I probably wouldn't have had if I went to Alabama or Auburn. And I was a school ambassador and got to travel to promote the school. One summer, I was for Faulkner, we would go and recruit students, and so we would go recruit them at church camps. And so you would do this 10-week pilgrimage throughout the Southeast to different church camps. And so I probably went to more church than most people have in their life, because that was my summer job. I did that for 2 summers. But, I just had an experience in college, not like a lot of people, because I was at Faulkner. And then that kind of carried over into the first job I had at Alabama Christian. I actually had to teach Bible. And they came in and said, here's the Bible. You got to teach Genesis. You got to teach the Old Testament. You got to teach Genesis. And then I had to teach the Gospels. And at Faulkner, you had to, for every 15 hours, you had to have 3 hours of Bible.
Wow.
And so I have probably 30 hours in Bible or, theology courses that I had to take over the course of time. And so, and I have one professor there, Harris Benson. He was 80. He's probably close to 85, 90. And he had never been married. And when he was in the Navy, he would memorize scripture. And I remember one day at chapel, there was a guy who was getting up to speak, and he was quoting the 2nd chapter of James. And he got stumbled up. And so Brother Benson, as we called him, got up and began picking up where he left off and quoted the rest of the book for him.
Wow. I
remember I had him for the book of Acts, and he came in one day and he was talking to us like he was just talking to us, but he actually was quoting Acts. He started in Acts chapter 1 and went through all the way through about the end of chapter 2 before he quit quoting.
Mercy.
Yeah, so I was around a lot of people that were spiritual forces in a positive way. And so I was very lucky. And living in Montgomery, there were some larger churches that, I always were able to participate in and go to. And so, and then when I moved back home, it wasn't long before I got married, and, and Stephanie has a very similar background as far as a good, strong family. And so, we were always in church. And then once I got out of coaching, there for 4 years at First Methodist Church in Andalusia, I worked with the youth. And so that was right before we came to Enterprise. So I was working on I got out of coaching and started working on my master's in ed leadership. And while I was doing that, I got to work with the youth there and see that grow and expand. And then I had an opportunity to come to to work in Dale County, and so I was able to. We moved to Enterprise. Stephanie is from Sampson. She always liked coming to Enterprise and wanted to live here, so we made that transition. And then when we moved to Enterprise, we shopped around at several churches, but we just felt like First Methodist was our home here.
Yeah.
And so, back then we were kind of the younger people, but now we're kind of the older people in the Sunday school class. So, church has always been a part of my life, whether it's, going as a child, having really impactful people that made an impression on me. And that's one of the things that when I think about raising Elizabeth and Ellie, is how I can make sure that, as a parent, we're very influential, but they really need outside influences that are spiritual leaders as well to be around, and having a core group of friends that help, make good choices.
Yeah.
And so that's, one of the reasons why we stayed here, because of the children's ministry and the things that, they get to experience and we get to be a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to go back to the influence that Coach Prater had on you. For me, in my testimony, Fellowship of Christian Athletes was just transformative for me. Of course, we had Northeast Alabama FCA did sports camps, and at that time they just had one, and it was in Albertville, and they would you could pick two sports, and I always did football, and one year I did football in the morning and football in the afternoon, and they had John David Phillips and a couple other guys. John Kroll came a time or two, and they had some other some Auburn people. I didn't know who they were, but they always had influence of guys that were able to share the gospel in that time frame. Yeah. And so even growing up, I mean, it was sports and faith were hand in hand for me. And there was a period in my life where sports was the only thing that I had, and I didn't have a good established faith. And but when I really knew what it meant to follow Jesus and began pursuing Him deeply, it was at an FCA camp, and I just fell in love with how sports and faith connect in so many capacities. And Paul even brings that out, right, in certain writings of his in the epistles of finish the race and like First Timothy, I think it's 4:7 or 1:7 says there's the training of the body has limited benefit, but the training for godliness is eternal. And so sports and faith, even just in the scriptures, has a unique relationship. So so that influence Coach Prater had on you, how did his coaching and his faith not just impact your faith then, but prepare you as the leader and your established faith now?
Yeah. So at Andalusia, we were not overly successful. I'll just say it like that. And to see him when we hadn't been successful on Friday night and come in on Sunday morning, and you could see he was tired, kind of downtrodden, but he still, taught our class or, made an impact on us throughout even after I got out of high school. He would, reach out to me and just check on me from time to time, just to see how I was doing. Just, those little things, make a huge impact on someone. And so just to see how he handled adversity when things weren't going well.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't, spew off a string of expletives. I mean, he handled it in a way as a Christian man would. And so that was very impactful, to see how he interacted with other players, but also when we were going through adversity, how he handled that and the lessons he taught us through that.
That's awesome. And do you still exemplify some of those lessons in leadership now as an educator?
Yeah. One of the things I always tell our new teachers, I'm over mentoring in Dale County schools now, and one of the things I always share with them when I met with our new teachers this year, I said, think about the people that were the most impactful teachers that you had. What did they do? And when you come to a situation where you don't know what to do, think back on how Coach so-and-so would have handled this, or how Miss so-and-so would have handled this. And then that'll give you a kind of a frame of reference of how to interact with that student, or how to handle this situation in a way. And that, because, sometimes we forget, what we've learned.
Right.
Just especially of how people interacted with other folks. And so, new teachers, because it's so overwhelming to be a new teacher. And so that is one thing that I do share with them all the time, that, look back to, and I think that's something that we can do in our faith as well, is when we come to situations, how would, someone who has made an influence on us, how would they handle this situation? And I think if you can do that for your kids too, is have those role models in their lives, then it's going to help guide them to make better choices, not, perfect choices all the time, but I think it does. The more positive influences you have, it's going to, help them make better choices.
Yeah. Yeah. In my own experience, of course, I've joked about it a few times. Our program, we had 48 consecutive losses in high school. And I was shocked to see actually the other day that there's a school near the Huntsville area that they're doing a documentary of some sort on for how many losses they've had.
Yeah, I saw that the other day too.
And I saw the name of the article. I was like, oh, this has got to be Brindley Mountain, but it wasn't. And but in that same vein, I had a middle school football coach, Ben Yancey, and Coach Yancey was like my Coach Prater. I mean, even in Pee Wee football, I remember getting cussed up one side and down the other by coaches. We barely knew how to tie our cleats. We couldn't attach our shoulder pads by ourselves. We were 8, 9 years old, and and somebody would miss a block, and it was just the end of the world. But Coach Yancey, he really demonstrated as a Christian man how to lead and coach and those things, and it stuck with me. And of course, this middle school and varsity are two totally different sports almost.
Yeah.
But we had a little more success in middle school, and Coach Yancey was just always about community, bringing the team together, positive reinforcement. And he'd get on you if you did something wrong, that's for sure. Yeah. But I never remember him using any explicitive and anything that was demeaning to somebody. It was always uplifting. There may be some times where he really got on the whole team. I remember one time I had missed a tackle, and I was just kind of dancing around like a ballerina instead of playing football, and he made sure to pause the film that day and show everybody. But I remember more of the times that he would just care and check on us. When I was playing for him, my grandfather died, and he and one of the other coaches came all the way from Brindley Mountain all the way to Gadsden, which is about an hour drive, to the funeral. Yeah. And I'm 8th grader, 7th grader. Yeah. In 7th and 8th grade, you're barely hitting puberty. You're not really a great athlete by any means at that point, and not that I ever was one, but he just loved every student that way, and his faith was just always evident, and it was counter to what I experienced in high school, where we have coaches that I didn't think that they knew words that weren't 4 letters. Yeah. And then they would say the Lord's Prayer before the game. Yeah. And they would talk about being good men in faith. And I had some shoulder problems. And I remember sitting in a coach's office with some of the other coaches. A couple of them were volunteer guys, and they were trying to get me to come back and play. We barely made 20 people on a team. I mean, we were in a bad spot, and I was still working out with everybody and those things. And I remember him telling me that I could, he was using one 4-letter word after another. I wasn't even on the team. I mean, just in casual conversation with a bunch of 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Yeah. And there's no place for that. Yeah. But to see the difference of someone who truly lives it out was an encouragement to my faith. And Coach Yancey and I still have a great relationship today. But, I think that I think it changes the whole culture too. And I think we can see that even in the community of the church, of how men can play a unique role in the life of the church.
Another individual that when I was a young coach that I worked with was Jimmy Reeves, and after we had coached together, one of the things that he started was a ministry. He was retiring. He wanted to start this ministry for coaches because he had went to Black Mountain. Did you ever go to Black Mountain?
I did not.
The FCA?
I did not.
But he used to go every year to Black Mountain, and he wanted to bring that to Wiregrass coaches. And so about 15 years ago, he started a camp at Blue Lake. And so every first weekend in June, area coaches from the Wiregrass, some come from the Mobile area, but it's a lot of Wiregrass coaches come to this camp, and we started going when Elizabeth. Well, we started going 15 years ago, but then when Elizabeth came along, we started taking her, and so every year she's, even though I'm not coaching anymore, she wants to go, and so we go, and it's great to see so many young coaches that are, Christians and faithful. And one of the highlights is John Ed Matheson leads the camp.
Awesome.
He speaks at it all week long, and he's been doing it for at least 5 or 6 years.
That's great.
Yeah, and so and they have several athletes come in and talk. Willie Spears has come in and spoke before, but one of the things that we always talk about in our huddles and things is the impact that we have on kids.
Yeah,
and teachers and coaches can just have this lasting impact that can last for generations. You can change the course of a kid's life, just by your influence.
You really can, and there are 2 times that I've really experienced that deeply. One of those was in high school, and long story short, my freshman year, I dislocated my shoulder about 10 times in a summer, and that I really just never could get comfortable in playing again after that, and really struggled. But I had a mentor as a teacher, Brett Thrower, and he was our ag teacher. Yeah. And boy, he just poured into me, and he got me involved with FFA and demonstrated that godliness, and we gave him all kinds of opportunities to use explicits. And we one time we took an airsoft gun with us on a trip, and we shot him and the bus driver on our way to a couple of things. And he said he couldn't figure out where it was, but he knew exactly where it was. We had one guy, Kyle Neal, and I know Kyle doesn't watch this, so I can share this story. But we had gone to Auburn for a FFA clinic, and they did anything that you could do with FFA. Auburn had a camp, sort of like what Blue Lake and others would have, just anything and everything. And FFA and 4-H and FCA are 3 of the largest youth organizations in the world. Mm. And I'll never forget, we were out there, and Mr. Thor pulled back up with the football coach at the time. He drove the bus for us and pulled back up the hotel, and there was Kyle Neal standing outside. He had a buddy that was at Auburn at the time that had brought him some Marlboros, and he was smoking outside the lobby of the hotel. And and Mr. Thor did just about everything he could to send him home. And it was just he made such an impact on just being a good man and father figure. In high school students, they spend more time with their coaches than they do their teachers, and a lot of times with their families. Oh, yeah. In those times. So that influence is huge. And the other for me was a couple of professors I had in college that did the same, just kind of took me under their wing. And in the church, I think it's significant, and you mentioned that of the impact that an educator has, and Sunday school teacher, and I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast, but I have on Sunday mornings. When Marilyn and I were dating, I had come down to Enterprise for a New Year's Eve service. When I came down, I met Foster and Trisha Oates, and I met Russ Vaughn. Those were two of the first people that I met. Yeah. And they all said, now you got to have our permission before you take Mary Evelyn on a real date. Yeah. And Russ taught her in 3rd grade Sunday school, and Foster and Trisha were there throughout her whole time in youth ministry. And it just, the impact that adults can have in a person's life in the church is so significant. and I think the statistics show the importance of men being involved in the church is crucial. So, and I know that we've got a lot in the books for men's ministry this year. But share us a little bit about what men's ministry holds, why it's significant, why some of our men that aren't involved need to be involved. Just talk a little bit about men's ministry.
Yeah, I think a lot of times men get left out of. There's a lot of activities for women in the church. I know, like here in our church, my wife loves going to the Wednesday night class that's who Ellen leads, and they build a lot of community. Us guys, we don't necessarily get together and talk and share our feelings that much. But last year I thought we had one awesome event where we went to Ravenwood, and shot clay, and so we're going to try to do some more events like that. I want to get us together, going down to. My dad has a little farm in Andalusia. And go down. He's got a fishing pond, so I'm going to try to put that on the books, the schedule, where all the guys can come down and fish, and they can tell stories about how big their fish was, but afterwards. Right. But also getting together and creating a support system for men in the church. This Wednesday we're going to be meeting. One of the things that we take it on as men, I guess, is making sure that our church looks really nice and great, and every year we support a fundraiser to do the flower beds and things like that, and so we're going to try to do that again this year with peanut bowl during the fall festival in October. So that's going to be the first thing on our agenda, and then get involved in the ministries that go into the steak supper.
Yeah,
we're going to try to get up and also try to get a group to go to a man church. We'd worked on that last year. There were some things that kind of fell through, but we're going to try to get a man church opportunity up and start a Bible study. That kind of coincides with that. The summer. Have you read Rick Burgess's book on? I'm not much of a reader, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of audio books. So I listened to it this summer. So I want to try to incorporate maybe a Bible study. That's a pretty good book. Men Don't Run in the Rain. So maybe incorporate that in a time where we can get together and have some guy time. I know men don't really necessarily like to share a whole lot with their feelings and things. So, but we can get together and have some time to create community.
Yeah, and I think there's some things for men that we struggle with on either sharing our emotion or being afraid of looking vulnerable or weak, and especially in a community like ours, in the South, that's a big thing for men. And I'll never forget, it's always my grandfather. We stood outside of Greer's Jewelers there in Gadsden, and I was probably 8 or 9, and my mom's diabetic. She got diagnosed about that time frame, and we were getting her a little med bracelet, and he wanted to get her one that was really nice, and he said, "Now, Matt, you're going to do all the talking." And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "You need to learn." And he said, "First thing you'll do is go up and shake his hand." And we practiced for about 10 minutes on the front steps of Greer's Jewelers of just shaking hands. And I went in, and he told me exactly how to do it. He made me do the whole thing. And just that art of the handshake. And I grew up around men at the hunting club and fishing and all those sorts of things. And it was always times when, we were waiting on somebody to disc up a food plot, mm-hmm. and we all be leaning on our four-wheelers and our trucks. And, one of the old men would say, something like, "Now, Matt, when you get married now, don't forget this." And, they always find some way to impart wisdom when there's nothing going on. And we always found a way to cut up and just love on one another. And I think men just do a better job of expressing that and talking about those things when they're active, when they're hands-on fishing or hunting or having that time by the fire or whatever it may be, or shooting clay and, mm-hmm. All of those sorts of things.
Yeah. One of my ultimate goals, our church has adopted the churches in Honduras with Lunch for Learning. Mm-hmm. I would love for us to go down and do some work in the community. And we talked about that, maybe doing a mission trip in the summer where we could go down and use sports as an avenue to kind of share the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think things like that are a lot more, I don't want to say attractive, but intriguing or interested for men to be hands-on and involved. Yeah. And I tell you, it's something that I'm eager for my boys to be surrounded with and to take them alongside some of those things, because those experiences you just don't get sitting in the pew.
Yeah.
And that's and sitting in the pew, sitting in the seat during church, of course, as a pastor, I want as many people there as possible to hear the word and to sing together and be in that community together. But the depth of that community is built in small groups. It's built when we can be doing life together, those sorts of things, more so than it is sitting together at worship. And, you and I were chatting beforehand, and, our church is not an extremely large church, definitely not a small church. And so sometimes you meet somebody and you don't know them well, and they are a new person. And sometimes you meet somebody and they're like, we've just been sick, but we've been here for 10 or 15 years, you know? And so sometimes on Sunday mornings, you can't connect deeply like you can in Sunday school, or like you can. And, we have a church member who's dealing with some difficult things. And I reached out to some of the men in his Sunday school class, and quickly we got a group text together, and, there may be some things we need to do for them in the future. And they're sitting on going ready, they're already calling him and praying for him. And those are relationships that are built over time. Those are things that don't happen in the flash of an eye. And I think that goes, even connects back to, when you think about the men that give impressions in our life, even from childhood on, we now have the privilege and the calling as men to do the same for the next generation. And I think it's important for us to step into that. And I think that, ways we can do that, deepening ourselves in the scriptures is definitely one. I think finding ways to be the leaders in the church and serve in some capacities, and I think that we got to find ways to, for the men in the congregation, at least, to create more opportunities for them to serve, that they're comfortable with. A lot of men aren't comfortable being greeters. Yeah. Big burly men standing out there, smiling faces,
Yeah. And, I grew up in a church. We had a Timothy class where they forced us to, we had to come up with a speech, and you had to give the speech in front of, they invited your parents and you had to give it in front of them. And then you had to create a sermon, like a short sermon, and then that was kind of the culmination of the thing where the boys, presented that to the congregation or whatever. But, anytime we can have opportunities where men can, and we've talked about this a lot in men's ministry, men like to do things. Mm-hmm. They like to do things, whether it's together and so that's why a lot of men aren't apt to just come to a Bible study. They want to be doing something while.
That's right. That's right.
An activity that it's more camaraderie, where you get that, but that you also get that spiritual connection too.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And I think that when we look at kind of bringing this all full picture, when we look at sharing our story and sharing our testimony, I think it's something men need to do more, not just in their homes, but with other men. And I think things like the Men of Valor, the Tuesday night steak dinner, and I think things like Ravenwood and others, it gives you those natural opportunities. And we have to be intentional, right, in taking advantage of those things. And I'm excited to see. We've got some different men that have been coming to the practicing the way study on Wednesdays, and so being involved in some of that, and so I think we're beginning to see a bit of a change in that. But overall,
we're just seeing growth in the church in all aspects, honestly, Matt.
Yeah, which I'm excited for. The Lord's really doing a lot of great things.
Yeah, I got chills Sunday morning at the Founders Day service, being there together with so many.
Yeah.
It was awesome to see where we have come, in such a short time.
Yeah, and the Lord's really the Lord's doing it. He's presenting opportunities, and I tell you this, and this is well, it's not a secret anymore because it's on the podcast, but the choir and the handbells have been invited to go down to the Peanut Festival when they do their Christmas lights.
Oh wow!
And perform one night down there, and so that's something that's going to be in the works, and it's just unique. Billy and I were talking about this past week of just how God's kind of lined these things up, and has even give Billy some affirmation that this is really something the Lord's given us an opportunity to do.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful to see how that unfolds, and one last question for us, and feel free to take some time to think about this, but in all your years of growing in the church and serving in this church, learning the book of Genesis, teaching the book of Genesis and the Gospels, what's the one story in Scripture or a verse or passage or book of the Bible that just impacted you the most, that you just say, if someone said, I don't know anything about the Bible or Jesus or faith, and you could just tell that with them that one moment that impacted you the most, what would it be?
So I really listened the other week, whether I think it was in Sunday school or in your sermon, you talked about just taking time to be quiet and study the scriptures. So I've had a lot of back issues, and I've finally gotten to a point where I can start walking and exercising again. So
In case y'all don't know this, I don't want to interrupt Perry, but Perry and I started a little 3-on-3 basketball game in the mornings a few years ago, and he and I both quickly got outplayed. Not about a year or two after that, but Perry's nickname was the Garbage Man.
Yeah,
he would be down there, and there were guys who were 6'1", 6'2", down under the goal, and Perry's still a rebound from him. Don't let Perry fool you. Now, he's a dangerous man, even with a bad back. Yeah. Dangerous man under the goal.
Well, and I was giving up like 10, 15 years on some of you guys.
Yeah, it's still taking us out.
But so I've started walking, and I've started listening to the Bible in the mornings. And so I've been listening to David, about David's story, and all the things that he went through, and how he was considered a man of God's own heart, and all the mistakes that he made throughout being king, and but he always returned to the Lord, and that's just kind of a neat. And I always like to read about David, how he really wasn't when. They went to go pick the king. He wasn't the one that they thought was going to be the anointed one. They thought it was going to be his brothers, because he was the little one, and then he had the issues with Saul, but he persevered and he became the king, and then he made mistakes as king, but he always found his way back to the Lord, and so that's something that's kind of resonated with me here lately.
That's awesome. And David's story to me is just so impactful in so many facets. But I think the greatest part of David's life that speaks to me is when he has that breaking point where he sleeps with Bathsheba, has her husband killed, is called out on his sin. The Lord says your family be continually separated by the sword. And the reason that's so significant to me is in youth ministry, I got this question a lot, and especially with young adults of, I can't be like, and put whatever hero of the faith you want to put there. And I think we miss so much of the scripture by only focusing on the success of these heroes. You look in the roll call of faith there in Hebrews 11. I mean, Rahab's a prostitute. Yeah. We all know what happened when Noah, after he got off the ark and got drunk and went into sin there. And David, of course, has a lustful moment, and he's caught in adultery and goes all the way. His pride's the beginning of that. But he He does not go out to war as kings do and stays home. And that just immediate sense of pride and how that flourished into so much sin of adultery and murder and lying and everything else. And how these heroes of the faith are still human. And it may sound strange, but it's an encouragement to me that even those that God had called and have chosen for specific roles in the scriptures had moments of human failure, and God still found a way to use them within that and after that. And because I think I'll never forget it. It's probably 6 or 7 years ago. It's 2019. And we had George Matheson, John Ed's brother, come and preach one Sunday. And then we had Carl Stegall come and preach one Sunday. And Carl shared a sermon that day, the two greatest things you could ever know in your life. The first is that Jesus Christ is your Lord. And the second is to accept the grace he gives when you mess up. And that second is so hard for people. And I've seen so many students, young adults who have just wrestled deeply with their faith because they can't see redemption in their sin, right? They think that they come to Jesus and they should be perfect and that he can't love them even after they've sinned deeply in their faithfulness. And the scriptures just show us a different picture, right? That there's grace offered. And even these heroes of the faith that we want to say, I want to be like this person and like this person. We should have those aspirations, but it's probably the greatest encouragement to me is to see how God used them despite their brokenness and even after it, that there's redemption, right? That we're going on to Christian perfection, striving for that holiness, that even in our sinfulness, God can find a way to redeem and give us another chance. And to me, that's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. So, well, Perry, thank you so much for being on today. Everyone, make sure that you share, subscribe, like our post, and if you've got anything that you want to hear about, make sure to comment that in the comments section, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us in the No Grow Go podcast. God bless.